Welcome to another episode of the Trusted Advisor podcast and video series powered by the Retail Solutions Providers Association. Our goal on the pod is to accelerate the success of today's and tomorrow's leaders in the retail IT industry. I'm Jim Roddy, back with you again. Thank you so much for joining us. In this episode, we'll focus on lucrative growth strategies for retail IT VARs, and our guest to help us tackle that topic is Rohan Mani, the Senior Vice President of Business Development at Shift4. Rohan, welcome to the pod.
Good morning, Jim. Thank you so much for having me.
No, always a pleasure to talk with you. And so before we get going, Rohan, and talk about that important topic, I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about your tenure and your career path at Shift4, because I find it both interesting and unusual. So there's been nothing but change in the payments industry, right? Anybody listening to this podcast who has interest, that's not news to them whatsoever, right? With acquisitions and a lot of individuals jumping from one, payment company to another. But you've been with the greater Shift4 organization going all the way back to the United Bank Card days in 2005. You were UBC's channel sales director, Harbor Touch's director of channel sales, Shift4 assistant VP of business development and strategic acquisitions, and now you're the SVP of business development. Can you tell us a little bit about your unique success story? It's not just stability, but Shift4's had rapid growth. You've had rapid career growth during that time. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I would definitely consider myself fortunate in that, unlike a lot of people in the industry, I have not had or any desire to really jump around. I think it starts at the top: extraordinary leadership and vision, thanks to our CEO Jared Isaacman. My path also ties me to the company in a very unique way, in that I've known our CEO and actually one of the other co-founders, Brendan Lauber, in a previous life when we were younger. So I was very fortunate to just know the right people at the right time. But unlike everybody else back then, I ended up choosing a slightly more circuitous path to the payments industry. I started out as an ISO. I did that part-time while I was in college, had a passion for sales, had a passion for making money and not trying to ask my dad for loans. So it was it's a very good industry. There's a low cost of entry. And so that's how I got started in the payments world, and then eventually worked on Wall Street doing something completely separate when I first graduated. But like most people in this industry, if you do it long enough, you'll start to see that recurring revenue grow. It becomes very lucrative, very attractive. It's a very attractive lifestyle. And I decided to put all of my focus into that. And then I really wasn't doing it full time for very long before our CEO decided to make me an offer and try and bring me in house. And then that started kind of from the ground up, building a reseller channel, which then evolved into trying to get resellers to pick up a competing product. So that was a very unique conversation, but we found our niche and it worked really well. And thanks to some visionary acquisitions and some, I would say, masterful chess playing of putting the pieces in the right places on the board, we've been able to achieve really stratospheric growth and putting together pieces that work really well that it had never really been done before.
Yeah, I'd say that is a good way to frame it, in terms of it is a one-of-a-kind situation, not just for yourself, but for Shift4. And I actually had a similar conversation with Suzanne Davis, who's been your coworker there for quite a while. She's an RSPA board member, and she and I were just having a side conversation about something I talked about this interview, and I'm like, man, you've had like really good stability at that organization. Like, that's hard anywhere, let alone in the payments industry. And she named some of the factors that you did as well that kind of go into to make this situation unique. I also have to ask you, before we talk about growth, I learned while doing research for this pod that you played in Big Ten football at Northwestern from '99 to 2003. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and your athletic background?
Yeah, so I've always been an avid athlete. I grew up playing probably the trifecta of the most common sports: football, basketball, and baseball. Was always a pretty natural athlete, and I did not go to Northwestern and play for all 4 years. With that in mind, I attempted to walk on and found some success, although my success was fairly short-lived and due to some injuries. But I mean, that's a really fantastic school and a great organization. That trying to play at that level is, you're in for a world of hurt and just, it's amazing how gifted some of the guys are in those programs. But I consider myself really fortunate to even been considered for the opportunity and I look back with some very fond memories.
Now, I have to ask you, because folks who can watch on YouTube or know me well, I wrote a book, published it a year ago, called The Walk-On Method to Career and Business Success. I'm a former Division II basketball walk-on, but like always, the first question I have for a walk-on is like, why did you do it, right? Like you weren't doing it for the money, and there were certainly plenty of other things to do, especially at a strong academic school like Northwestern. Like, why did you even give it a shot? What was the impetus behind it?
Well, I actually always had a passion for fitness and was always in the gym working out and things like that, and ended up meeting a couple of guys who were on the team, and then also who introduced me to the right people if you wanted to go down that route. And you know, I'm always a pretty adventurous person. I'm a risk taker and always willing to just try something new. And then having had a pretty strong athletic background, I thought, why not try? And that's really just how it materialized. Again, like many things in life, kind of serendipitous timing.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. One of the walk-ons in the book, he was a pretty good high school athlete, but he ended up going to Marquette, and he was thinking like, well, I'm never going to be able to do this. Well, then the team was having like a preseason barbecue, and they invited everybody, and he was there at the barbecue, and then he just sees the head coach, and he's like, hey, is there any chance I could play? And he's like, well, you can try out. And so one thing led to another, and he had a 4-year career. Again, not a lot of playing time, but wouldn't have traded for the world. Like you said, completely serendipitous. That's for sure. Maybe a life lesson for all of us, right? Seize those opportunities when they're presented to you.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
all right.
absolutely. And work hard. Work hard, and the harder, the old saying, the harder you work, the luckier you get. So that's always been my montage.
100%. That was kind of the gist behind the whole book, right? In terms of ordinary people can become extraordinary, but it's taking that big shot. It's practicing, and like you said, outworking everybody else. So, well, and that's a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about is from a VAR growth strategy standpoint. We're not going to talk about that you wave this magic wand and everything's going to get better. But let's dive into some of those. I have a list of VAR growth strategies that I want to share with you that I've learned over the years working with successful resellers. But I want to hear your top of mind thoughts on that topic first, Rohan. Like, what strategies are working best for your resellers, and what guidance do you and the Shift Forward team give to your VARs to accelerate their growth?
So I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the number one thing, and this is, I feel compelled to say this because there's still a lot of people who don't do this, a lot of partners, and that's embrace payments. I know that it sounds like a broken record because we've been saying this for years, but payments are a natural fit, and embrace the tech stack and what you have to offer, because not everybody has the tools or the knowledge base to go after a certain demographic of customers and take care of them in a way that at some point they're going to start to get on cruise control, and that's where the payments are so effective. And that the old saying, we make money while we sleep. People are always swiping credit cards 24 hours a day, depending on what vertical you're in. So that's probably the number one thing that I have to mention. But in addition to payments, the embrace the technology and the change that comes along with it, because I think a lot of resellers are still stuck in some of their older ways, and some people have some legacy, more antiquated software. And we're finding more often than not that all of those bells and whistles aren't really what sells these days. It may be what eventually the customer's going to ask for, without a doubt. But initially, to get that sale, there's a few keywords or hot topics that they're always looking for, cloud and mobile and things like that. So I would always have a sharp eye out for what's the latest and greatest, and also know how to sell against it if that's not what you're offering. So embrace the technology, try and look for what's the latest and greatest. But the other thing is also not to over diversify. I know this may sound a little counterintuitive, but the most successful partners we have are the ones who really focus on their core constituents. Whether it's hospitality, whether it's retail, and then even subdividing a little bit more down there. If you're in the hospitality vertical, how far up market do you want to go? Do you want to chase enterprise customers? Do you want to, maybe you shouldn't waste your time on the real small food trucks and things like that. So the partners that really know their niche and where they fit, where their product sells best, and they embrace that, we've seen, the numbers I wish I could share are just staggering, what I see some of the partners earning every month. And that's just from our side, not including all of their support contracts and everything else that they bill for.
Yeah, no, I'd say a loud amen to that. Again, I serve as a business coach for the RSPA as well, and that's the guidance that a lot of folks give. The riches are in the niches, and you want to make sure you don't become a generalist, right? The generalists are the ones who are fighting on price because they don't have anything specialized. And we also had, in the middle of 2020, there were no trade shows, but the RSPA Academy had our symposium, and we had Dan Jablons from Retail Smart Guys, and then we had Jeremy Julian from Custom Business Solutions. Dan's all retail, Jeremy is all restaurant, and they were talking on there in terms of like, I'm not going to beat the other person's knowledge at all. Like, there's no way. Like, I'm way too far behind in order to do that. And so they do stay in those lanes for sure. I am curious. You said embrace payments. And so I'm curious, can you talk about that a little bit more? Because I guess I just assumed that every reseller is doing payments to some degree. Are you talking about that they need to, not just carry payments, but they need to do more? I guess just in general, can you clarify when you say embrace payments, what guidance are you giving to resellers?
Yeah, it's a great question and happy to elaborate. I think first and foremost, we do still have partners that payments really are an afterthought. They still try to remain payment agnostic. And I think that's a misstep. Not to say that they're wrong to do it, but just from the data that I've seen, those who really sell payments as part of their service and put their company's name as the payments company or as the ones representing it, not trying to take this hands-off, arm's distance approach. That's the first kind of step into that. But then to go a step further, and your entire business model, those that have modeled their business based on the recurring revenue they're going to make off payments and actually offer to subsidize hardware, software, support contracts, pushing things like our Advantage program. Everybody has these types of cash discounting programs, which are now more common. And I know that, it's still new. There's still a little bit of a gray area that lives in. But the bottom line is, if you really take ownership of the payments and make it a priority, more than trying to get that service contract, even if you have to go out 6 to 12 months sometimes. And I know it's hard. Not everybody has the capital to carry that type of longevity. But if you can, and if you're willing to take a little more risk that way, you're going to be really well off down the road.
God, I see what you're saying. I know I talk to some resellers where they say, I know somebody wants to buy all this stuff from me, but I tell them, if you don't do the payments through me and you don't go with the payment processor that I'm recommending, I'm not going to do the deal with you. Is that kind of what you're talking about when you say like that's fully embracing payments?
Yeah, that's fully embracing payments and even learning to forego some of the other support contracts. We do have a partner similar to that and many like that, but one who will go as far as to waive some of the other recurring payments. We have some really smart partners, and they've even told us, the recurring payments for things like tech support, that's expensive recurring revenue. And it's almost makes more sense to just focus on the payments that you can control, that you don't have to worry about collecting, because that's a whole other side of things. The payments are easy to collect from, because worst comes to worst, you can even hold off their credit card receivables. So there are a lot of strategic advantages to doing that.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it. So the 4 growth strategies that I want to talk through with you are: number 1, adding new products and services; number 2, a reseller entering a new market, whether that's going to be vertical or geographical; number 3 is outspending the competition on marketing; and number 4 is ramping up an outbound sales force. Those seem to be the 4 core strategies that really accelerate a VAR's growth. And let's start at the top of that list. And so what are you seeing as some of the products and services that are driving VAR growth today, and what are they offering, I guess, beyond the core point of sale system to really increase their revenue?
So I'm more focusing on the hospitality niche, just because that's what a lot of our resellers focus on. But newer technologies, like things like QR pay, for example, different ways that customers can pay at the table or mobile payments is really important. I think if you look at some of the initiatives in terms of trying to even offer some type of online web store to go with it, or maybe just to supplant some of the third-party ordering companies that take a lot of revenue away from you. No doubt you're going to need things like a DoorDash and an Uber Eats and so forth. But if you have another way to harvest emails and things like that, so that eventually you can teach the customer to do direct marketing, that's really advantageous, because as their reputation grows and they get more customers, they're going to have a huge swath of or a huge database that they can direct market to. And so that's another really nice selling point for customers.
Got it. Great. And I want to ask you next about entering new markets. But first, we're going to pause here to let our listeners and viewers know an RSP membership has never been more valuable or more affordable. Annual memberships for VARs start at just $250 a year for dozens of high value services, including RSPA Accelerate. The RSPA has launched the next generation of education for the retail IT channel with RSPA Academy EXCELerate. This online system offers continuous learning, training, and development opportunities anytime, anywhere, from any device. For more information on RSPA Academy EXCELerate, visit learn.gorspa.org. Also, thanks to the sponsors who support the RSPA community and make this podcast and video series possible. Our platinum sponsors are Blue Star and Shift4, and our gold sponsors are Heartland and ScanSource. Finally, don't forget to save the date for 2 special RSPA events in 2022. Inspire, the Retail IT Channel's premier executive conference, is January 23rd through 26th at the Wyndham Grand in Clearwater Beach, Florida. And Retail Now 2022 is July 24th through 26th at the Gaylord Palms in Orlando. To receive the benefits of an RSPA membership or RSPA sponsorship, email membership@gorspa.org. All right, well, let's talk about entering new markets. And so, Rohan, do you see any specific verticals you want to point our listeners towards in 2022, verticals that are growing faster than others, or are you going to double down on saying, no, like ignore all the other verticals, just focus on what you do best? What advice would you give there?
I would lean towards the latter. And that again goes with my simplistic approach on being an expert in your niche and sticking in that lane. Because if you try to be a jack of all trades, if you try to make a car that can handle as well as a sports car and carry as much as a pickup truck, that's a really difficult dichotomy to manage. And we've always enabled people by having a retail product, by having a salon and spa product, by having a convenience store product. So there are verticals that our partners have access to through our various other software suites, and that's going to keep growing. In fact, we have Micros 101 initiatives and Hotel 101 initiatives, meaning we enable some of our partners to go after those verticals. And while they do take advantage of it from time to time, having all of these options available to them, we've seen it firsthand. The most successful ones are the ones who have not embraced all of those other options. They've just stayed in their lane and focused. Again, not to say that that's a wrong approach, but just looking at what I've seen firsthand, it's better to be a master of one thing than an amateur of a dozen things. So that would be my advice.
And is there kind of I guess an in between to that, because one of the workshops that we're having at Inspire is called How to Win in a New Niche. And I guess one thing that we've seen is you can't just dabble in 7 different niches, right? If you have your core one, you're going to add an adjacent one. You've really got to make sure you're focusing in there, right? You don't do with your left hand or your left pinky or something like that, right? Like you've really got to understand and dedicate the resources to it to become a specialist there, not just another player. Is that kind of what you're thinking as well? Like it's not, hey, don't ever get into another niche. The niche that you're in right now, you're committed to that for the next 100 years. Is that kind of the approach to it, where you've got to measure the niche, and then if you're going to go after it, you have to put real resources behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. We have some, and this just, I wouldn't say it's purely coincidental because there must be some type of a trend here, but we have some really successful partners that specialize in both hospitality and grocery. And so while the two are related to food services, they really are completely different in the type of software, service, and support. And that served a lot of them really well, especially last year during the whole COVID pandemic, where restaurants were shut down. Some of my grocery guys had the best years of their life. So
yep.
I think there is a way to do it, and to do it confidently in the right way. And that is, as you said, to really put 2 feet in the water and have a specialist on each side. Now, one of the other things we've seen people embracing, because from an overhead perspective, it's not nearly as cumbersome, is online. So you can have your retail niche, whatever that is, but you can also have an e-commerce section. And you'd be surprised with e-commerce how you tend to get much higher margins. So you don't necessarily have to have a customer that's doing immense volume to have a really profitable customer. And again, there's almost no overhead, and it's just a question of finding the right customers. And how do you do that?
That's right. And one of the guidelines we give of breaking into a new niche is having a PDR responsible for that niche, a person directly responsible. And if you say, I don't have the bandwidth to have a person directly responsible, well, then maybe you need to build that up first before you go and try getting into a new niche and letting down your current market. So good.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on. Strategy number 3, it's outspend the competition on marketing. And I'm going to give you a chance here to plug how Shift4 supports their resellers from a marketing standpoint. And I'm not doing that because you're going to Venmo me $100 or something like that in order to say that. But I help coach an RSPA VAR member in Chicago, and he resells Shift4, and the backbone of a lot of his marketing efforts are provided by Shift4, a lot of mailers and flyers and things of that nature. So can you talk for a few minutes about what marketing have you seen is most effective for VARs?
Sure. So we've seen other competitors do this as well, but one thing we do really well is marketing, and we provide a lot of different templates for our partners. So they don't have to generate the content. It is their responsibility to financially circulate it, whether they're doing e-blast through one of the various like MailChimp like services or doing actual mailers. We have a really large partner who requested a lot of marketing material from us, and we were happy to provide it, but they wanted to actually physically mail out the marketing material, and that's one of their ways. So, and I've seen people find success in every single way. So some people spend a ton of money on Google AdWords. A lot of people spend a ton of money on physical mailers, and then other people actually own call centers. And all three really work. The question is, do you want to focus on one or spend a little bit on all three? Now, again, going back to what I've been saying, not to sound like a broken record, is those who seem to have the most success focus on one of those advertising verticals, and they just stick to it and they put all of their marketing towards it. No one person really, this is the great thing about this, is no one person really stands out as the winner. If there was, I would tell you, but we have some of our largest guys that do e-commerce, just marketing, other guys who do physical mailers. Now, in terms of outspending, yeah, that's tough because you are going to have to spend some money to make money. But by sometimes we've offered people pre-designed websites, having all of the marketing collateral designed in advance is really helpful. So at least we try to help ameliorate the situation there.
Yeah, this reseller uses a lot of the mailers, like you said, the templates, puts his name on it, and he just has a regular drum beat where he sends those out, not to 1,000 people, right? But he has a niche group that he's constantly tapping them on the shoulder. And then when he stops by, they say, oh yeah, we remember hearing about you. And sometimes they have the flyer right there. It's in their drawer or something like that. So again, but he does it very, very consistently. It's not one of those things, and I think a lot of our listeners know this, but some might not. You think, I do this marketing strategy and I'm going to stare at my phone and wait for it to ring, right? It's really planting the seeds, but it's going out there. And I'm guessing you find that with your resellers, the ones who persevere, and they're the ones who are very consistent. They're the ones who win the business. Maybe not in that first month, maybe not in that first year, but it's just time after time. Is that, I guess, a big part of, when you're outspending the competition on marketing, it's not just money, it's the time that you invest in it as well, the effort.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you mentioned, consistency is key. You can't run a marketing campaign and judge the results based on 1, 2, even 3 months of results. You really have to look at it in a much longer, look at it like a marathon. And you may don't spend all of your money running that first 2 kilometers of the marathon. You need to have enough there to spread it out, even if it's not as much advertising as you would like to a larger group in one shot. The consistency will put you in a good place.
That's right. Exactly right. Yeah, you got to tap them on the shoulder regularly. So, all right. So the final strategy, and we're saving maybe the most impactful one, but currently the most painful one for last, and that's ramping up an outbound sales force. And I say painful because before the pandemic, it was hard to hire and keep a good sales rep. And then during this labor shortage, it's only gotten more difficult. So, Rohan, can you focus on how important it is for VARs to have an outbound sales team who's proactively outreaching to prospects instead of just relying on word of mouth? And then also, what are some of the best practices that you've seen for making that sales team as effective as possible?
Yeah, it without a doubt, the largest producers are the ones that do have a sales team. And I'd actually start with the tail end of your question, and then how do you get good salespeople? Because it's really difficult with inflation and the rising cost to hire people. A lot of people just have, I think, have some muscle atrophy, and it's hard to get moving again. I'm a momentum person, and once that momentum slows, it's really hard to get it going again. Not to say that you can't, but one of the things some of our most successful partners do is offer a piece of the actual residual income. I know it may not be what you want to do, but the highest producers treat their employees really well, and the residual offers that. Now, the one risk associated with that is once your employees get to a really significant residual amount, they tend to slow down. But those are also good problems to have. That means they've sold a lot. And it also allows you to offer a lower upfront salary because you can give them tangible goals and show them what you can achieve. Our reporting system, for example, and others have this as well, allows you to give somebody a rep code, and you can run a report every month by rep, and you can see what they earned, and you can show them very clearly and easily how much they've earned, and it's a residual, so they're going to get it every single month. So that's a really important, I think that is, from what I've seen, that is the most successful way to get buy-in from your employees, to get longevity and loyalty out of your employees. Now, somewhat different than having an agreement with us where your payments are guaranteed, you have some flexibility there as well. So you can certainly tell somebody if their production starts to slow because they get to a really high monthly residual number, maybe there are some adjustments that you can make. So we operate on the same way we've done for 20 plus years, where if you're a partner, you're always going to get paid your residuals. But that's not to say that your agreements with your reps can't be a little bit different.
That's right. And 2 points you bring up. One is for everybody who's listening to this, email me at jroddy@gorspa.org, JRODDY@gorspa.org. And I'm happy to send you the link that we have. We did right in early 2020, a sales compensation study for VARs and talked about a lot of these things. And it doesn't say here's the one formula that works, but it gives you the variety of the different formulas that folks are, and it'll tell you, to the point that Rohan said, in terms of who is providing, residual payment over the long term, who's only doing it for a short period of time, like what are all the different ways to do that. But I guess a main point that you're making, Rohan, is, and I wrote this down, there are no good, cheap sales reps, right? Like, you're not going to get a bargain on somebody who's a good sales rep. If they're good, someone's going to offer them a lot of money. And quite frankly, if they're good, they're probably making a lot of money already. So if you think you're going to get somebody on the cheap, you are, but they're probably not going to be a good salesperson. That would be like, predicting when lightning is going to show up. I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree 100%. You hit the nail on the head. You're getting what you pay for in this instance in every way, shape, and form. Yeah, that's not to say that you have to put a lot of money up front, and that is the beautiful part of offering them a piece of the revenue share. You can offer them a lower salary with the expectation that the long term, what they're going to make is significantly more, and they're actually going to have some type of vested equity with you. So that's worth a lot more than anybody else can offer. And it also enables you to scale more, get more reps, because you don't have to put all your eggs in one basket with one rep. You can try hiring 3 or 4 reps. And then if somebody doesn't produce, it's a lot easier to pull the trigger and maybe remove them.
And they'll probably remove themselves on their own, because if they're not producing and everything is tied to production, they'll probably end up moving on themselves. So again, our 4 growth strategies for retail IT VARs: adding new products and services, entering new markets, outspending the competition on marketing, ramping it about outbound sales force, and kind of wrapped in all this is vertical competence, right? That's what Rohan said right from the get-go, in terms of don't be dabbling in different areas. Make sure you're really good in every single one of these areas. And if you are going to outspend the competition on marketing, spend it on a specific market. If you have an outbound sales force, have them really focus on that niche market. So, well, Rohan, before we go, if our listeners and viewers want to talk with you to get more about, learn more about growth strategies, how should they connect with you?
Sure. I think the easiest way really is email. It's my first initial and last name, R Mani, just like the clothing line, but no A at the beginning, just the letter R and Mani, M-A-N-I, at shift4.com. Shift, like your keyboard, the word shift and the number 4. And on your keyboard, when you hit that, it creates the $sign. So hats off to the person at Shift4 who came up with that, because it's pretty cool.
That is very good. I never even made that connection, but very good. I appreciate that. And are you planning on being at RSPA Inspire and Retail Now in 2022?
Yes, I am, and many representatives of Shift4 will be there. We appreciate all the RSPA does. It's a fantastic organization, and would highly encourage all of your listeners to partake in the events that you offer.
Well, thankful. Thank you very much. It's a wonderful community. And again, Shift4 has done a great job supporting the community. Well, that does it for this episode of The Trusted Advisor. We hope you enjoyed our discussion. If you did, be sure to subscribe to the RSPA YouTube channel and the Trusted Advisor podcast so you never, ever miss an episode. We'd also appreciate it if you'd rate us wherever you find your favorite podcast. My personal philosophy is the more stars, the better. And if you'd like to learn more best practices for VARs and ISVs in the retail technology industry, check out the RSPA blog. You can find it at gorspa.org and then clicking on RSPA blog. Before we go, big thanks again to Rohan Mani for sharing his wisdom with us today. Thanks also to RSPA Marketing Manager Chris Arnold for his production work, Joseph McDade for our music, and last but not least, thanks so much to you for listening. Our goal at the RSPA is to accelerate the success of our members in the retail IT ecosystem by providing knowledge and connections. For more information, visit our website at gorspa.org. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, everybody.